emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 053.NU1516, certificate number 53289. Anthropology Days.
It's time for the people of Paint Hills to head into the bush and set up camp for the goose hunt.
The Omnibus Project is against racism.
It's the main reason why we started it.
It's one of the big like tenets of our show. Racism is bad.
We have that big sign over there that says racism, but we put a red thing through it.
We did a big slash through it. And we practice that every day. Especially these days when racism,
coming back.
Yeah, but we're against it. And that includes for our futurelings, our multi-tentacled futurelings or our sentient aspens. We also want to acknowledge their living souls.
Yeah, not just racism, but
Speciesism.
And like, this is achronological, so it's, is there even a name for, time travel hasn't been invented, so it's hard to discriminate between people based on the period of time they come from.
Right. I mean, we're living in a time where attitudes are very different than they were even 100 years ago. Maybe 100 years from now, attitudes will be...
If you could hang out with somebody from the year 1200 and the year 2200, it would be a weird kind of ageism if you were like, I hate that generation from the Renaissance. These guys suck.
Those guys suck. You know what? Gen X versus Gen 1, right? Or Gen I.
Gen I. It's true. We should have just gone back in time. We got to the end of the alphabet so quick, but we could have just retroactively said, nope, baby boomers are Gen W. Silent generation, Gen V. Gilded age, Gen U. I mean, you only get like 23 more.
Yeah, but that's a lot.
It does. It gets you. Yeah, it gets you through America. It'll peter out sometime in the Enlightenment, I think.
Yeah, but that's fine. Everything did.
Who cares? There were no generations in the Dark Ages.
Yeah, going back, right? It just peters out as soon as you get to Württemberg. You're like, meh. What was there before this?
There's not even church records telling me, how many babies got christened. These places might as well not have existed.
How do you feel about zoos? It's a strange transition to make from being anti-racist.
We're anti-racist
to talking about zoos.
I've always been so pro-zoo. And
you live very close to a zoo. I
love the zoo.
Opsec you.
Not to dox me. And our kids grew up going to that zoo, sometimes multiple times a week. I just found out my college kid still goes.
To Woodland Park Zoo.
Yeah, he'll just show up at the zoo with his girlfriend, and he'll show them like my membership, and they'll be like, Ken and Mindy, and he'll say, "Yup," and in they go into the zoo.
And what do they do in the zoo? They just wander around. They look at the
see what the bears are doing.
Are they? Do they have a preference? Do they like the wolves?
I don't actually know. We are wolf poor right now. I think the last gray wolf just died.
Oh no!
We need new wolves.
Did you know that there's a zoo in Issaquah?
Oh yeah, I see the signs on the freeway for it.
I have been to this zoo, and it's like it's like an old-fashioned neighborhood zoo
for non-Seattleites. You head east on I-90 for half an hour toward the Cascades, and there are signs for a suburban zoo.
Yeah, it's called Cougar Mountain Zoo, and it's full of cougars. It's on a mountain.
Hence
it's
the name.
it's got a lot of wolves, and the wolf enclosure. I don't know. It sort of feels like it abuts a loading dock. Like it's a strange. I like the zoo, but it's a weird.
If you like zoos and loading docks,
It's a weird zoo. I gotta say.
I think we may have talked about this on Omnibus before. Amid all the controversy over whether the Seattle Zoo should get rid of its elephants,
Right.
I started to worry about zoos in general. And, but talking to some conservation-minded friends, I think their take was, some animals probably shouldn't be in zoos, but, even if zoos weren't doing all the, typically now they're just the faces of a vast international conservation program. But even if they didn't do all that work, if they were just displaying animals that could not do well in the wild because they were bred in captivity or because of an injury or whatever, and raising the awareness of these species and their habitat loss to the people who file through, that the zoos would still be ethically defensible. And I felt better about that.
Yeah, there was a zoo in Alaska that had a one-winged eagle, and he was still a majestic bird.
Like half as majestic? What percent? Like 70% as
I'd say he
majestic?
was pretty majestic. I mean, if you look into a bald eagle's eyes, it was pretty serious.
Yeah, but if
creature.
I had a two-winged eagle next to him, who would I pick?
I think you'd pick the two-winged eagle. Yeah. But there were also brown bears in this zoo that were living in. They had enough of an enclosure that they had dug dens and were hibernating at the time, and it was like, ugh. But then one came out, and everybody was thrilled. I happened to be there on the day that this bear
he woke up?
Yeah, took like a 6-hour break from his hibernation, and we watched him walk around, and then he
to greet the fans?
Went back into the den and went back to sleep, which apparently they do.
I've been to the old bad concrete zoos, and I think it's okay to be against those zoos, but for better zoos.
What was the worst zoo you ever visited?
There was a not great zoo in Seoul, Korea when I was a kid that really was just... There's still that kind of not great animal park out towards Squim.
Is it not great where the zebras come put their heads in your car?
Well, that part is great. Like this animal park was, I think, a result of a bunch of animals kind of aging out of their movie careers, like animals that had appeared in Disney movies, for example.
Okay.
And I don't know if a local bought them or was like, I can get cheap land up on the Olympic Peninsula of Washington State, but that's what populated these. And if you drive around the safari part and the zebras come up to your window and the llamas get snot on you, that part's fun.
Yeah.
But there's also a bunch of carnivores that have also been come to dwell there that are not in good shape. They're in kind of the old concrete boxes, and it's sad.
The Madrid Zoo used to be awful.
I've heard you say that.
I watched a great gorilla, silverback gorilla, sit in a concrete box with a wall of kids pounding on the glass, and you could see he was just in torment. But the worst thing I ever saw was there was a gas station in Arizona or New Mexico where the guy had just bought white tigers and had them chained up behind his gas station in these cages that were as big as this room. And, like literal giant cats, like baking in the Arizona sun. I guess there was a roof over that section of it, but it was just like, we're filling up, and there's a sign like, go around the back of the station. There's some white tigers.
There should not be.
Sure enough, it was pretty nuts.
I'm not saying anybody should be Siegfried and Roy, but maybe that guy.
White tiger gas station guy. I'm sure.
That's sad.
I'm sure there's someone listening to the program that's like, actually, he was a great philanthropist for a town of 800 people.
We'll see when the 6-episode Netflix series about him comes out. We'll find out. We'll find out what we actually think about him.
Well, anyone who's seen the movie Gladiator knows that traveling animal circus kind of spectacles are as old as time.
Didn't we do a show about the hippos of Rome or something? Yes. From as far back as we have records, boy, people have loved to see faraway animals.
They do. Well, and what about the hippos of Central America?
We did
those too, right?
Maybe it was the rhinos of Rome. Yes,
the rhinos of Rome.
I did a show about the Mediterranean and then Northern Europe getting a rare glimpse of a rhino and just losing their minds.
But our show takes us kind of to one of the places we love the most in the omnibus that isn't like Air Force bases from the 1950s. And that's
mostly you.
That is the 19th century. Boy, we talk about the 19th century a lot.
People have made maps of omnibus clustering of geography. Has anybody ever done the chronology?
No, I don't. As far as I know.
I want to see a timeline with a rising, falling thing of what are we really into?
Like I said last episode, I've been locked out of my Facebook page. So for all I know, the Futurelings have written an entire encyclopedia, and I have no access to it. I'm also not on Discord.
There are some that are kind of achronological and are just about a long trend through time, or even something that's kind of divorced from time. But most of them have an era.
Yeah, and the 19th century was such a time of great. I don't know if progress even is the word anymore. We would have said progress, but a time of like an explosion of technology and a shrinking of the world. That affects us so much that I guess we go back there a lot because there maybe falsely is a sense that there was pre the invention of the water machine and post.
The water machine?
The water machine, the famous water machine.
Is that what you call a drinking fountain or a slip and slide?
I think I meant the steam engine, but other water machines.
This show has been translated into Chinese, then Polish, then back to English. And now it's the water machine.
Brown bird, red bird.
I feel like the appeal of the 19th century to me, you said 19th century.
I did.
Right? The appeal of that to me, and this is terrible because it's very chauvinistic to me, is because America existed.
Yeah.
Like back before my country's era, it's a bit of a blur. I have to think for a second, like, did the 30 Years' War come before or after the 100 Years' War? Okay, no, after. I got it.
Yeah.
Whereas like things in my country's era line up very neatly.
Yeah.
Yes, I can picture Cleveland was before Harrison and then also after Harrison. It gets a little fuzzy for me the further back you get.
And with your Jeopardy knowledge, can you identify like when each state joined the Union?
Oh.
Is that a piece of knowledge that you have?
No, I would say it's about half and half.
Half and half.
Like if you told me like, what? No, Indiana's 30 years after Ohio, I'd be like, oh, of course it is. And if you said the other way, I'd say, oh, of course it is. Or they could have been the same day.
I don't think there was 30 years separating them.
No. But I'm saying there's a vast, I'm not somebody who has the list of like all of them.
Right.
Some of them, 1912 is Arizona, New Mexico. 1876, Good. Colorado, because it's a centennial state.
Well done.
What's Washington? We should know this one.
1885?
It's in the 80s. I don't know.
1880.
I remember the centennial of it, so.
Washington.
89?
Centennial. This isn't going to give me the... Centennial Washington is actually a town in Arizona.
It is, in fact, 1889.
But that was Centennial Wash.
I want credit for actually guessing a year that turned out to be right.
Well done. Well done, 1889.
It was a 1 in 9 chance.
But I think one of the other things, I mean, we love the explosion in strange American religions.
Yeah.
And we love the sort of the rise and fall of 19th century technology. But we also like to talk about 19th century trends in social theory.
They were close enough to be interesting, but also, close enough to be really dangerous, right?
Yeah, and I think in the 18th century there was a lot of social theory, but there wasn't a ton of experimentation. Or it was the beginning of an era where let's build a panopticon and see if it works. Let's test some of this stuff out. But there wasn't quite the technology to really put some of that. It wasn't even proto-eugenical, because anything pre-Darwin would have been much more sort of deist.
Right. The assumption is going to be, there's going to be a theological assumption at the heart of it.
Right, exactly. Whereas there, post early 1800s, we started to be able, by we, I mean the people of the north, the northern hemisphere.
Guys with beards? Who is the we here?
Started to explore the world, and there started to be fewer and fewer corners of the world that hadn't been surveyed.
That's one thing that changes. It becomes more global.
Yeah.
You can't stay away from you can't just stay away from the Enlightenment anymore just by being in Borneo. It's coming for you.
It's coming for you whether you want it or not. And also, you no longer have to march elephants over the Alps. You can really put an elephant in a box and put it on a boat or a ship.
And do science with it.
And do science.
Philosophers had interpreted the world in various ways, Mark said. But now, like you say, you could actually build that panopticon and see what happens.
And see what happens, right? And it was a dawn. It was kind of a dawn where science was no longer exclusively the province of bored aristocrats, but there was now science as an industrial discipline, right? It wasn't just let's build a panopticon to see what happens, but let's actually build these systems as a way of ordering society, as a way of building cities or expanding. We're going to put these things into practice. And I mean, we still live in this world where social theories are converted into law. We're
going to get data, and that'll make things better.
And data is that's the big driver, right? And the data is either going to prove this social theory or demonstrate it, or it's going to be disproved by, or the social theory will be disproved by the data. And that's very hard now because, as we know, you can tailor data to prove whatever you want. So often we have social theories that are collecting data selectively. Well, maybe with intrinsic bias to the degree that you don't even notice.
The end already in mind.
Yeah, the end already in mind. And that was, of course, always true. Everybody with a social theory who also is enlisting scientists or quasi-scientists, there's always... We grew up in a time where we admired people and institutions that really claimed to be seeking a way to pursue their investigations without bias, right? I mean, we believed growing up that the media strove for unbiased reporting. Walter Cronkite was not going to take a stand until he did, and the world was forever changed. The Vietnam War came to an end, a screeching halt, when Walter Cronkite raised an eyebrow.
We lost Cronkite. And even somehow, this is probably pretty selective, but that even governments were sensible.
Meant to be.
You know, once we see how many, what the levels of mercury in the water are, the laws will quickly change. We just need that data.
Right. And I think starting at a certain point, and again, 18th century.
And maybe ending at a certain point, like right now.
a certain sense that educated people were pursuing truth and not just confirmation of bias.
Yeah.
So if you were smart or earnest in any way, regardless of where you started, evidence could convince you. Ken, I know you like to snack. I do too. And I was so excited to open up my door the other day and find this box of Mosh snack bars. Here, let me give you one and try it. Here. Isn't that delicious? Well, while your mouth is full, let me do a little ad read for Mosh. You know, the older I get, the more I find myself wanting to be more intentional about the way I live. Am I right? I want to eat better and take care of my body. And I'd already heard about Mosh. You may have heard of it yourself on the television show Shark Tank. Well, Mosh was founded by Maria Shriver, daughter of Eunice Kennedy, as you may recall, and her son Patrick Schwarzenegger. And it was founded with a simple mission to create a conversation about brain health through food, education, and research. Because Maria's father, whom I'm sure you know was Sergeant Shriver, who helped found the Peace Corps, he ended up suffering from Alzheimer's. Ever since then, Maria and Patrick have dedicated themselves to finding ways to help other families who are dealing with this debilitating disease. Maria joined forces with the world's top scientists. Isn't that good? Aren't you enjoying that bar? Just take your time. Enjoy the Mosh bar. I certainly have. Mosh joined forces with the world's top scientists and functional nutritionists to go beyond your average protein bar. They have 8 delicious flavors, including a plant-based one in peanut butter and chocolate, which is my favorite. And each Mosh bar is made with ingredients that support brain health, like ashwagandha, lion's mane, collagen, and omega-3s. And now, Mosh bars come with a new look and new formulation featuring a game-changing, brain-boosting ingredient you won't find in other bars. It is now the first and only brain food, the first and only brain food boosted with cognizin, a premium nootropic that supplies the brain with a patented form of citicoline. But here's the best part. To make you feel good, Mosh donates a portion of all proceeds from your order to fund brain health research through the Women's Alzheimer's movement, because 2/3 of all Alzheimer's patients are women. I want our listeners to go to moshlife.com/omnibus to save 20% off plus free shipping on the Best Sellers Trial Pack. That's 20% off plus free shipping on the Best Sellers Trial Pack at moshlife.com/omnibus. Thank you, Mosh, for sponsoring this episode. Ken, here, have another bite. It's so good. But the 19th century had limited access to science, or rather, science had only just begun. We didn't even have a periodic table yet.
In hindsight, we would see that some of these studies not designed real well.
In 2300, I think they will look back at our current time and say a similar thing.
Yeah, I'm not so proud of our current time. So.
I showed the periodic table to my daughter. Well, not showed it to her, but I mean,
check this out.
I woke her up.
Sat down next to her on a park bench.
Look! But, she's about to go into biology. And I said, chemistry. And I said, let's look at this and let me just kind of show you how it's laid out. And really struck by what a funny little document it is. It's only 100 years old and not even really. And it's meant to describe the entire of chemistry. And yet, what an incomplete, and it tells the story, what we don't know, much more eloquently than it describes what it does.
If you had to force me to give a hot take on the periodic table, I would say we could do better. Like any data visualization firm should be taking a look at the periodic table. Because you're right. Like what they noticed is, hey, a lot of these things act alike in a numerical and we found the pattern.
So let's put them in columns and colors.
But it doesn't convey very well what's actually happening within the atomic structure that is leading to that periodicity. And I bet there's a way to display that much better. So all you get is this weird idea that it's tall over here with hydrogen, but then it's not till helium. And also there's all these transuranic things that don't fit real well, but we'll just put them in the corner like Alaska and just say it doesn't matter because it's also heavy down there anyway.
And the number on the top left of this square and the number on the top right of this square, like it's really terrible. I have a copy of it around here somewhere in a frame. Like a 60s periodic table before
from a classroom.
Yeah, before they started inventing
all the fake ones.
And I was studying it and just like, come on, people. There's got to be either that or this is the best visualization of it, and what's missing is the real story, right? This has to go.
It has to have narration.
Yeah, but we have a tendency to look at all that stuff through our current eyes and go, well, there it is.
That's all the things.
That's the whole of the world.
If somebody is listening, please, maybe it should be 3D. I don't know. A sculpture? Could it look like these bookends somebody said?
Well, so that's what as I was looking at it with her and trying to explain it, and she was just like, oh my God, eyes eyes just rolling back in her head.
As a kid, you're just like, hey, some of these I know, gold, silver. Oh, oxygen, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Like you're just looking for islands or anything to cling to in this grid.
Well, and I'm saying so these electrons, they're in they're in orbits, and some of them are outside, which can interact with and then others are inside and they can't. And she's just like, come on. I'm like, well, I'm telling you, this is what's coming in your life,
it's
my
not
friend.
my fault. This is what the universe is made out of. Look, molybdenum was not my idea.
Look, not my idea. I couldn't even tell you about it. But so in the 19th century, right, it's an era where the Western world has now newly access to the whole of the world. It's also a time of colonialism where Western nations are going around the world and kind of grabbing territory, often kind of taking over countries by just sort of stepping in and using the pre-existing social order as a way of, the British were really famous and I guess arguably you would say good at this.
I thought you were going to say infamous, but no.
Infamous, let's say infamous, at coming in and saying like, you guys just keep running things as you're doing. We're just putting ourselves at the top of the pyramid.
Oh, you've got an oppressive caste system? We can work with that.
Yeah, your oppressive caste system is really familiar. It's very similar to ours.
We love it.
And
for extractive reasons, like you're building an empire.
You're building an empire. And
we've all played the boring German board games.
The British chauvinism was, of course, that they were bringing civilization to the world, and they really wanted a lot of the European mentality wanted there to be explanations for the order of the world that we now look back at and understand as
self-serving.
I mean, and we use a kind of overarching, encompassing term of racism to describe it, but it was, it was also married to a lot of what we now call pseudoscience, but also what we now call science. And pseudoscience morphed into science as a process of experimentation and often, a bad idea filtered through a scientific process and identified as a bad idea. So that era, looking back at it, there are a lot of ways to see that time. And I think it's our tendency now to kind of sweepingly denounce a lot of that, and rightfully so. But also from their perspective, right? It was the beginning of what became the scientific process. And
so science had some wins here.
Well, science had a lot of wins. I mean, science is under maybe graver threat now than at any time since its invention. But we didn't arrive at what we think of as modern social theory out of the blue, right? And we didn't arrive at modern law out of the blue. Like it started somewhere, and its process of encounter, it had to assimilate, and I mean the whole of science, right? Had to assimilate new information and gradually try to eliminate bias through this process we're describing with as many good-intentioned people as bad.
Even the bad-intentioned people weren't like, I'm a bad-intentioned people.
No, not at all. And entertainment played a big role in the widespread acceptance of science, just as entertainment played a role in what became fine art. Entertainment played a role in what became good government.
I feel like there's going to be a World's Fair here somewhere.
Oh, my God. So many World's Fairs.
That's science as entertainment, right? You got to see one of those balls that makes your hair stand up. You got to see one of those other balls that crackles with fake lightning inside it. Just balls as far as the eye can see.
Balls is orbs.
Science orbs.
Yeah.
People would come from 3 states away to see the new science orbs.
But the original concept of, for instance, like parading your defeated enemies through the public square, it probably goes back to the first time 2 groups of people warred.
It's probably prehistoric.
Yeah.
Is there evidence from Mesopotamia? I bet.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, in a way, every Roman frieze that depicts all the people of the world marching across the walls of well, what am I thinking of? I mean, the Parthenon had friezes of all
Trajan's Column.
Right, Trajan's Column. All the defeated peoples, and they were portrayed in their local garb. And it was both, I mean, it was in a way proto-anthropological. Like if you're never going to meet somebody from Africa, you're going to see them carved into stone.
I guess there's some continuum that starts with that and ends up with some cheery mid-20th century mural at the UN showing children of all the world in their traditional garb.
Right.
And we're in some weird, the 19th century is a weird inflection point where it's still being informed by, look at all these benighted lesser people we have conquered, and not quite, it's a, I don't even, the modern take is not what the UN Charter era take would be. But
no, my mom talks about the popularity of social anthropology as a college major in the 1950s. And this was the era of one blonde German guy embedded in Borneo and kind of like partly, I mean, and maybe in a lot of ways, entirely sympathetic to the people of Borneo, but also blind to the fact that he's there collecting data and basically measuring people's noses and writing it all down in a very paternalistic way.
yeah.
And that's the thing about the UN, like it's a small world after all. There are certainly people now that look at that and go, oh my God.
Well, you think about it, if you write It's a Small World After All at Disneyland, and you're like, oh, this treats Africa like a country, and it's really all about the tiger, the lions, and the zebras.
Yeah, all the Disney movies.
Like Denmark and Norway and Sweden got a room each, and now here's Asia. It's a little unclear where. Yeah, it's a little unclear where the China ends and Vietnam begins, and yes.
But a lot of this starts with the dawn of a lot of our story today. Starts, honestly, with a guy named Karl Hagenbeck, who was a German, who his father was like a seafood salesman, but as a seafood salesman, also kind of like would capture mermaids, seals, and kind of put them on display at the dock. Like, I'll charge you a Deutschmark to come look at these things that I found, and
yeah, as low market as the Issaquah Zoo is, all circuses used to start this way. Just a guy with a thing to show you.
And I mean, I don't know when people started putting muzzles on bears and bringing them into town and making them dance and play the violin, but there were always bears, and you could always get a rope around one and bring it to town.
That's a medieval thing, at least.
Yeah, and charge a shilling to see the bear. But Hagenbeck's dad gave him, as a kid, working as a fishmonger, brought him some exotic animals, and it really struck this little Karl as, I mean, he was an animal lover, let's say, and an amateur zoologist.
It's like the opposite of showing your daughter the periodic table. He was actually interested. It's like, whoa,
look at this. I mean, there's a difference between being given the periodic table, and especially one from the 60s, and being given a seal. Like, here's a baby seal.
If we had showed him like an etching of a seal from Vitus Bering, he would have been like,
I mean, maybe I should try giving my daughter a seal pup, but I think it would be frowned upon in my current neighborhood.
You could get her the thing people do where they build the periodic table with a sample of every element. Have you seen somebody doing this? Yeah.
When I took geology at the University of Washington, I got one of those rock boxes that has every little rock. And I loved it so much that I went through a phase every time I would see a rock box for sale at some like odds and ends shop, I would buy all these old rock boxes. And some of the old ones have really nice rocks. Nicer than they sell now.
They still have the rocks in them?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was the whole point of them. I wouldn't buy an empty rock box.
I just thought the rocks would have gone missing long ago. It's a good find if it's still got the rocks.
I think with the rock box, the whole point of it is you put the lid on it when you're done. You don't take the rocks out unless you give it to a child.
That's good.
Like, in this sense, Karl Hagenbeck. But he then gradually expanded out from his initial baby seal to sort of capturing and became sort of a dealer in live, wild, exotic animals.
What's the area here? What year are we talking?
We're talking about, this is pre-Civil War. He was born in the early 1800s. And so by the
There's an exotic animal trade already.
Yeah. By the 1830s, 40s, he's now venturing far afield and also contracting with people who are traveling in Asia and Africa, like bring me back a lemur. Bring me back 5 lemurs.
If I had a lemur, I could write my own ticket. There's not a lemur between here and Heidelberg.
That's right.
He might say.
I'm the lemur dealer.
I'd be the lemur guy.
And so he was the lemur guy, and he opened zoos. He supplied zoos with animals. He actually supplied P.T. Barnum with animals when P.T. Barnum, who's about the same age, started his kind of spectacle show. And this was also a time in the United States and in Europe of this kind of, like in the U.S., we had the Wild West shows, freak shows where people were, with encephalitis or people, Siamese twins were first displayed, right? This was, Chang and Eng, probably the Hottentot Venus.
The original. Oh, I don't know about the Hottentot Venus.
The Hottentot Venus was just a African woman that had an exaggerated physiology, like a butt bigger than what you might see in Denmark. And she was actually sort of displayed for years. And people would come. She looked like the Wittgenstein Venus.
The Wittendorf
Venus.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. And so people would come and actually like poke her and go like, wow, look at how big her butt is. And I think this
complicated area today because, at the time, a lot of these people, were happy to have the job security. If you have some congenital thing, like there's maybe not a lot of options for you in society at that time, sadly.
Right.
But on the other hand, they were being dehumanized literally every day.
And being part of a circus did become a kind of job, a professional job, so much that people had agents and negotiated. Like, listen, I've got a really, really big nose, and this is my ask.
Yeah, it becomes different when you think of them as celebrities who are choosing what to do with their. Kim Kardashian is a celebrity but she's choosing what to do with.
I doubt she lets people poke it.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
they have a little more leverage today.
Yeah, there's a little bit of difference. And the thing about the Hottentot Venus, for instance, is the dehumanization or the spectacleization of an African woman was controversial even in its time.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, people were like, this is
that's interesting.
Very seemly.
You'd think everyone would be like, yay, here's a new thing to see. But there were people who were like, hey, she's a person.
That's the thing.
I wouldn't want my kid to be poked in a zoo.
There were always people who were against slavery, right? Even P.T. Barnum, later on in life, said people of all races have human souls and should be treated equally, even as he had over the years, of course, gone through many phases of displaying people as curiosities.
Yeah.
But he, was anti-slavery. Like he was, I don't think even you would say that he ended his life reformed.
I'm sure he would say, and therefore they have the right to appear as stars of my traveling show.
Exactly. A lot of that. But by the late 18th century, the introduction of science and what became eugenics and the kind of colonial presumption that Western society and Western culture was superior, both because of the superior technology and government, but also just the racial superiority of the European races.
Just unquestioned, of course.
We're
not in the jungle.
There was now it was presented initially as a sort of science, as like a cultural amusement, maybe, that they would, as part of a World's Fair, as part of an exposition, erect little Potemkin villages and bring people from the Sudan or from Central Asia and say they're going to live here in the center of Paris in their huts, and we're going to watch them live their natural life, right? Pre any kind of film. This is your one opportunity as a French person to see what it's really like for the Ainu people of Japan, or indigenous people being almost exclusively the subject of fascination. But
they're the ones that have the most different lifestyle and the sense that you're seeing something unsullied by contact with the West, and therefore, analogous to learning how a beehive works, or how a family of lions hunts, or whatever.
But one of the hangovers or like cultural through lines from the Enlightenment was the corresponding belief that maybe natural man was the purest form, and that we were polluted by modernity. And I mean, this was kind of a Lockean perspective, certainly a Jeffersonian one.
Noble savages.
Yeah, the noble savage. Maybe the Native American is living the better and purer life than the German farmer.
So you're going to see maybe happier people.
Potentially. And again, with a very paternalistic...
Simpler in a paternalistic, condescending way, but maybe happier?
People then were now coming from Micronesia, right? Samoa and from Borneo, who were previously uncontacted. So not like people from Ethiopia that had been interacting with Western civilization for 2,000 years or more. But,
this is almost like a new discovery, like the same way astronomical space discoveries might be presented today.
Right.
Do you think, was the science good? Like, were we actually seeing what their huts were like and what their meals were like?
Well, what's funny is that, well, maybe not funny.
I don't know. I'm saying we. What?
Well,
Germans.
Go ahead. The French. Let's call them the French and the Germans. There was pretty early on a sense of collaboration. Like you're saying, these were many of the people who were living in these kind of Potemkin situations. And in a way, it's like going to colonial town USA, where people are being paid to dress up like someone from 1830 who's sitting there cooking while people throng around.
Johnny cakes.
That people were getting paid. They did see themselves. They weren't here. This is 1870s. It wasn't a time when they were enslaved people who were being brought here and forced to dance.
But it is a separate question of how much they were being exploited.
Yeah.
Did they understand what they were doing? Were shysters cheating them once they arrived?
Yeah, I don't think there were casting calls in Khartoum where it's like, hey, who wants to go to France and pretend to live in a hut? Like, it was and a player in this was Karl Hagenbeck, who had so much experience bringing hundreds and hundreds of zebras to Europe in order to populate the zoos, said, it's not that much more difficult to start bringing Zulus or, like the people of like the Nubians, I guess he would have said. And so
this isn't doing much for the argument against dehumanization.
No.
If it's like, we got these animal traders and lion tamers to run this show.
And it was the anthropology idea was, well, now we have the animals in the zoos. Now we're going to bring the people that live among them, and we're going to see their primitive ways, right? So it wasn't we're going to put them in cages and poke them with sticks. We're trying to understand, this is the overlay of science. We're trying to understand how they live. And you can't, of course, just like my experience in the Madrid Zoo, you can't keep people from pounding on the glass. There surely were people in that Madrid Zoo who were standing back, appalled by the behavior of their fellow humans.
Just one field trip of kids.
And, like me, just like horrified, but there are also a bunch of kids. I mean, there are kids at the Woodland Park Zoo who are kicking the glass and.
But if my job was to like pretend to be living my indigenous life in the middle of a World's Fair somewhere, like it wouldn't take that many of those people a day to really change the tenor of my job.
Yeah, it'd be a drag. And I think there was a lot of commentary about it at the time that was like, and
how many racial slurs are you hearing an hour? Like if you're a security guard at this exhibit, like maybe a lot.
And a lot of the pushback came from black ministers.
Oh, interesting.
On the East Coast saying like, look, we got enough problems with, in a post antebellum South, or rather, I guess, an antebellum South.
No, antebellum would be before.
Before, right.
It's a postbellum
a
South.
Postbellum South.
It's also post-antebellum, I guess.
It's post-antebellum. But just black ministers in New York saying, this is not kosher. We don't want to, as we're arguing for equal representation, we don't then want also...
Yeah, we're as civilized as any white American. This is going to muddy the waters.
Yeah,
right?
The idea of like then going and watching people walk around a fake Nubian village and laugh, and laugh.
In fake war paint. Or even if it's authentic war paint, like it's
a drag. Yeah. But Hagenbeck, he's a very complicated figure because he brought he did play a major role in the transportation of people as part of this zoo show to things like the Paris exhibitions of the World's Fairs of 1878, of 1889.
This wasn't sleazy back alley stuff.
No, this was not a traveling circus. Like these were major installations
that all the best people and scientists and professors were attending and studying,
stroking their beards, and there was a lot of interaction.
Oh, look what they do in mealtime.
There often were situations where some of the indigenous people would kind of behave uncharacteristically, like stand up and give speeches in French, and like really bum everybody out. Like, oh, come on, you were supposed to pretend to be cooking with a stick, like. You're not supposed to speak French, so there was.
I guess I like
tension in that.
I guess I like that vision better, where they at least know their actors and are breaking character, as opposed to like, why is it so cold here? Why do we have to stay here? Like,
no, there was quite a bit of that, and that kind of plays into our story. But Hagenbeck also was the person who said we shouldn't keep animals in cages. He developed the original let's make animal zoos open, let's build savannas, his theory of zoos became known as the Hagenbeck revolution of zoology.
It occurs to me now that you can do that without caring at all about the animals. Like what you're doing is presenting to the viewer a more authentic view of where the animal actually lives. He may not be thinking, and of course the animal would love to have the plants and whether it's evolved to.
I think it was both. I mean, I think it was let's present this in a more natural setting, but also he'd seen a lot of white tigers in cages.
Yeah.
And was like, let's give them room to run around. I don't know. Where I'm not here to argue that Carl Hagenbeck was the greatest man.
Why do you have that statue of him over
next to my periodic table?
The great Carl Hagenbeck. I mean, I guess.
But so now we go to we fast forward a little bit to the Olympic movement, which we've talked about on Omnibus before.
I had a very early one about the marathon in a very early Olympics, I remember.
Yeah, and the Olympic movement kind of establishing the Olympics of antiquity, that had been maybe a popular idea in the United Kingdom and in Northern Europe sort of for centuries. People would stage foot races and call them Olympiads. Princes would say, princes, but a baron would say, I'm gonna have everybody come and try and throw the javelin, and we're gonna call it the Berkshire Olympics.
It was just a classical reference, the same way we would compare somebody to an oracle or a Trojan horse or something.
But the modern Olympics were founded by a baron, actually, Pierre de Coubertin, and the first couple of Olympics were held in Europe.
Athens and Paris, I think.
Athens and Paris. And they kind of laid the groundwork for what we think of as the modern Olympics. I mean, they're the connected forebears of it.
They already had track and a lot of the sports that are still practiced today, right?
Yeah, right. And interestingly, the Olympics as a concept really are sort of strange bedfellows with this, just in the sense that that's the nations of the world competing against one another. Like, let's see who is best at running, jumping. It wasn't...
I guess I never thought of this phrenological angle of the Olympics before.
It wasn't...
It's a little muted when it's all like white European countries doing it.
It is, but that competition extends very naturally to the idea, and I think probably a lot of the mid-century Olympics or the 20th century Olympics, there were those overtones of like, well, let's see if the Nubians can. And actually, Baron de Coubertin went on record saying, once the people of the world, once the brown and yellow and red people in his terminology.
Not ours.
Not ours. That's not what I would say.
Don't write letters.
That's what he said. Once they actually show what they're capable of, it's going to ruin the Olympics for everybody.
What is the idea that we will know? It'll be like, well, of course he won. He's Japanese.
Yeah, and I think it was. I think he recognized that these racial tropes, or the idea that the French man was intrinsically superior to the Sudanese man, wouldn't hold water.
Oh, do you think he's worried about this?
No, he was. He said, boy, that I've let the cat out of the bag, kind of, as this travels around the world, as more people are invited. The Olympics are the enemy of the argument of white supremacy.
But some people would be like, even at the time, we're probably like, and good, but that was not his take.
No, I think it was partly. I mean, I don't think he started the Olympics as a racist project.
Look, a lot of things didn't start as a racist project.
Well, and if you think about the Olympics, the argument that, all of the great marathoners are from Africa, all of the great swimmers are from Australia, like these do reinforce, sort of racist tropes.
And it becomes self-reinforcing,
right.
Like Koreans are good at archery. You know why? Because they were like, hey, these Koreans are good at archery. I'm going to do our thing, archery.
Jamaicans are great at bobsledding because
Famously.
It's just the mountains of Jamaica.
They just love it.
They do.
Those blue mountains.
But so we don't think about those sort of comparisons. And also the idea of race in the 19th century and nation. I mean, they had very different ideas of what those words meant and those concepts. But so the first Olympics to be held outside of Europe in 1904, Baron Pierre de Coubertin awarded the Olympics to the city of Chicago. And it was going to be the first North American Olympics, only the third Olympics. And Chicago, very excitedly, let's put on a show. But that same year, the city of St. Louis had not awarded. The city of St. Louis was holding the 100th anniversary World's Fair of the Louisiana Purchase.
Right.
So,
but by the way, this is, I think, the same Olympics that had that crazy marathon that we did an omnibus entry about years and years ago.
It is. It is. And that marathon, we'll see is kind of a little bit of a kicker right at the end. But the Louisiana Purchase Centennial Exhibition was going to be a really big deal in St. Louis. And they said, look, if Chicago has the Olympics, they're going to pull some of the focus and the excitement from the Louisiana Exposition.
Because then as now, Chicago was just a better St. Louis, a slightly better St. Louis.
And so the St. Louis people threatened, if the Olympics were held in Chicago, that they would hold their own separate athletic competition.
Oh, wow.
Embarrassing Chicago with the many splendors of St. Louis.
Because they already have this infrastructure for this big fair, this expo.
And so the threat of ruining the Chicago Olympics caused de Coubertin to now rescind the invitation from Chicago or to Chicago, and now the 1904 Olympics were going to be held in St. Louis.
Big L for whatever political machine is running Chicago at the time, right?
Yeah, they were like, but it was actually a kind of a big L for the Olympics because most of the European competitors
couldn't find St. Louis on a map.
They couldn't. And they were like, God, that's a long trip through like swampy, muggy central United States to a town we kind of haven't heard of.
They didn't know there was going to be a big Judy Garland musical about this expo someday.
No, they did not.
That would have changed their tune.
It might
especially if they were gay.
Of the 651 athletes that appeared at the 1904 Olympics, only 62 of them were from European countries or countries outside of the United States.
It was basically an American Games like the 84 LA ones.
Yeah, it really was. And so it was kind of from an Olympic standpoint. I mean, if you're trying to get the Olympics off the ground, this was a real dud.
Real asterisk games. Yeah. We should have done it someplace with a seaport.
So much so that de Coubertin didn't even attend. He was like, this was a mistake. And they jump-started it again with the following Olympics that then really kind of ignited the Olympic movement.
It should have been New Orleans. You could do a Louisiana Purchase thing in New Orleans, and that would be a big world city that you could actually catch a boat to.
Yeah, right.
Unlike St. Louis.
Yeah, and I mean St. Louis was the gateway to the West. This was if St. Louis had a moment, it would have been sort of.
Yep.
This would have been in the middle of that time.
1908, they went back to London. In 1912, Stockholm. Yeah, it's all the royal European capitals with big palaces and colonnades, and then it's St. Louis.
Yeah, they said, maybe not back to the United States for a little while. But the U.S. was kind of coming off of our big victory in the Spanish-American War of 1898. We had colonized the Philippines, and we sort of, maybe for the first time, started to see the United States as a globe-spanning power. We had our own colony across the Pacific. It was a heady time
not for the Filipinos,
but as part of the World's Fair aspect, they built sort of Potemkin village of Filipinos. They brought 1,100 Filipinos to St. Louis to occupy an entire town they'd built to display and encourage people to encounter the Philippines.
This is much more like a theme park.
Yeah, meet the Philippines. And it was a theme park. The Philippine village was 47 acres.
Did you know Epcot kind of works this way? Like Disney will still get every year they'll recruit 100 Swedes and 100 Caribbean folks to populate their little Potemkin villages.
Yeah, and the fair also had like a pygmy village. They had American Indian tribes come from Mexico, come from Montana to sort of display their native ways. They did have Ainu from Japan, but they also had like some Syrians, some Turks. It was a World's Fair in the sense of proto-Epcot. But
I guess Epcot avoids a lot of the implications of this by not being strictly indigenous people. You can also wander through a Canadian log cabin town and a Black Forest town and a Spanish villa and all the rest.
And just like you're saying, the Danish room of the It's a Small World After All kind of takes away the fact that actually what we're really here to see is the little Thai girl spinning around.
But if you're, I mean, it's going to be what's most novel, I guess.
Right. The Danish girl. I mean, some of us.
If you see
into Danish girls,
well, sure, there's nothing. But if there's a Polish village there, you probably know 100 Polish people in your neighborhood, and that's probably who's dressing up in old world garb. Like, This is if it's Syrians, that's something you haven't seen before.
But it was an interesting opportunity, I guess, or it was seen as an interesting opportunity by a man named James E. Sullivan, who was the head of the Department of Physical Culture of the World's Fair. And he recruited a man by the name of William McGee, who was an anthropologist who did have a lot of anthropological theories about the peoples of the world. And the two
could go either way, but okay.
Yeah, the two and a lot of anthropological theories about the superiority of Western man.
Specifically, okay.
And they kind of ginned up this idea. Listen, we're having the Olympics here. We're having the World's Fair. We have all these people from around the world. Why don't we take some of these Filipinos, some of these pygmies, et cetera, and have them compete in a Special Olympics, which is what they called it.
They really said Special
Olympics.
Huh, probably the first use.
Where we're going to array people from around the world competing in Western sports to see how they do. The hurdles, the javelin, and the assumption was they'd be great at javelin because it's a spear and they're the indigenous people of the world. It turned out that nobody from the Philippines or the Ainu from Japan, none of them knew how to throw a spear. They were terrible at it.
But this is a eugenically informed endeavor, right?
Let's put them. Let's have them compete against one another as a spectacle, but also in Western sports, so that then we can compare their performance to American athletes or white American athletes, and see like how much better we are at the hurdles as an example of how superior white Americans are in general in every respect.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because this is followed by a century of racists having to grapple with the fact that white Americans are not the best at every sport, and then the racist theories that come out of that, right? But it's funny that they go into this thinking, clearly we'll beat all these people at the hurdles.
Yeah, and this is what Pierre de Coubertin was like, I don't think you're going to find that that's true, given a level playing field.
Yeah.
But what happened was because of the many languages involved, no one fully explained the sports. So, for instance, the concept of a foot race is familiar to all the people of the world, but the concept of a starting gun is really not. Right. And that didn't go over, right?
Leg up for the Americans.
And everybody, and the thing is, they weren't initially competing against Americans. They were only competing against one another.
Okay.
Crossing the finish line and breaking the tape at the end of the line, which was at the time the way of determining the winner. A lot of the foot racers would arrive at the ribbon and stop and wait for everybody else to catch up.
I feel like that's what I would do.
Yeah, and then they all kind of ducked under the ribbon and were like, ta-da! And
you don't want to break the ribbon.
So this was not a well-attended event. People.
Oh, this was like a day out. It was like a field day.
There were 2 days, August 2nd August 12th and 13th in 1904. Now, if you can imagine St. Louis in August,
that's exactly when I want to.
In a way, I still can't imagine being in St. Louis in August because I've been to St. Louis in August, and it's not a thing I would wish upon my worst enemy. No offense to anyone who's living in St. Louis and listening to this in August and thinking, it's not so bad.
It's not so bad.
It's really, really hot and muggy there. Very humid.
We're from Seattle. We don't adjust to different climes, to exotic climes like Missouri.
Well, so on the 13th, they and the thing is that this is happening before the Olympics proper began. So this was the first Olympics for a lot of things. This was the first Olympics that had a parade of nations at the top of the Olympics, although only 12 nations were represented.
Parade of several nations.
This was the first Olympics that had gold, silver, bronze. Yeah.
They were just giving out laurel wreaths before that or something?
Yeah, there must have been just a slap and a tickle. I don't know. A Coney Island dog.
Is a slap gold and a tickle is silver?
I don't know. It depends.
Which
would you prefer? I think I would prefer a tickle. And it was a long Olympics. The opening ceremonies were in July, and the Olympics didn't end until November. But
can you imagine if the Olympics today were 5 months long? Yep, more badminton today. We go now live to the arena.
I think it coincided with the fact that this was a World's Fair, and that's typically like how long a World's Fair would last, bring people for hours or for days and days. But the competition between indigenous peoples was staged on August 12th and 13th, and it was called Anthropology Days. What
a fun title.
What a fun day. And the word anthropology made this both part of the World's Fair, which is kind of what, and what was funny about the athletes that were invited to participate, as they were there as part of the display of their country.
They were not athletes necessarily.
And they also were like, well, wait a minute, we're being paid to occupy our little village and cook over an open fire. You're asking us to throw a shot put, and we're not being paid?
Oh, did they get a check? Did they negotiate?
Well, no. I mean, a lot of them were like, "Why would we do that?" And so they only got a handful of people, all men, young men.
This event it's like the fire festival. This seems terrible.
It was a little bad, and in fact, they had in the initial competition of like throwing the shot put, they had a dozen guys throw the shot put, and then they tried to get the leading 5, and nobody would do it a second time. They were like, we threw it already. It's like, well, yeah, but now we have to see.
What do you want from us?
We've eliminated like 3/4 of you. Now the remaining.
I'm sorry. We are from a culture without semifinals.
Yeah, there was no interest in throwing it a third time. And so on the second day, rather than compete in Northern European events, the organizers, and this is James Sullivan again and William McGee trying to sort of, in a way, Anthropology Days was, James Sullivan and William McGee are trying to put these people on display in a light that appears, well, I mean, you can kind of put yourself in the scene, right? This would be a curiosity, but also it is people from other nations competing in an Olympics. It is the first time that people from Africa and Asia are in the Olympic Games.
However, unintentionally, it's kind of putting them on the same footing as a Greek marathon runner, or a Russian javelin thrower,
to an interesting degree, right? And it was meant, I think, by these anthropologists to be an unfair or like a kind of staged example of like, well, here are some primitives who are doing like maybe.
I mean, it's almost like when you go see a bear try to dance, right? Like, is it a little like that?
Except
look how they're going to try to do our sports.
Except that I think a lot of these young men outside of the Potemkin village context were like, well, hey, I'm a modern human guy. Like, let's see what you're trying to do. And so the following day, they tried some events that they imagined indigenous people would be good at, like tree climbing and archery, which, people around the world do practice archery, but not necessarily the people that came to
not just random
Syrian
guy.
Yeah, the fact that you're here to live in a hut for 4 months doesn't mean that you're necessarily great at archery.
It probably didn't occur to them that you couldn't just pick a random Missourian and have them try to do an American sport and have them be world class either.
They did invite 2 tribes, the Mohawks and the Seneca, to come play lacrosse against one another as an example of a Native American
sport. That would be
sport.
Actual anthropology compared to some of this.
Although the best lacrosse teams at the time were from Canada.
Right.
They didn't invite Canadian teams because the American assimilation of Native Americans was the American assimilation project and the Canadian one were very different from one another. And the American organizers did not want to put the Canadian method, which was not quite so culturally, not such a cultural nuclear bomb.
Not a vanquishment.
Yeah.
It was still the residential schools and everything, but
not quite as draconian as the American model, and they didn't want to invite Canadian Native Americans down to,
because then it would show the
the
superiority of their lacrosse and therefore possibly their entire endeavor.
The thing that actually attracted the most spectators was the girls' basketball teams from the Fort Shaw Indian Reservation in Montana.
Why? Were they super good?
They were super good. And there was this element of, well, it's one thing to try and get an Ainu person from Japan to race a Syrian in a shot put marathon, but it's another thing to see captive or indigenous peoples who are successfully doing Western sports. Another big attraction was the Philippine Constabulary Band, it was a marching band. And the idea that Filipinos could be in a marching band was enough of a novelty that they were a huge attraction. Look.
I guess even when they achieve well, it serves some assimilationist ideal of look how proud we can be that basketball and Sousa marches have even reached these benighted people.
Well, the response, there was a lot of critical pushback, even in its time.
Huh.
This is unseemly. This is not, and although these kinds of native villages not only survived until World War II, but as you say, morphed very gradually throughout the 20th century. There were still times when
you could go to Disneyland in the 60s and see so-called war dances and rain dances by some tribe that had been brought in.
For sure. And often they kind of became Disneyfied. They were animatronic or they were animated.
Yeah.
But still, I don't know, when was the last time you saw a representation of an African tribesman?
I feel like don't museums still have these dioramas of kind of mannequins? Maybe I'm picturing, kind of what should have been a Neolithic thing, but I think in our lifetimes we saw plenty of museums that would show that.
Yeah, right. Somebody with a bone through their nose holding a
here's a blowpipe of a South American tribe.
It certainly was a feature of television specials until recent times. The Nazis actually outlawed this kind of stuff in the Nazi era.
Racist in the wrong way.
Primarily because they were worried that people brought into the country would stay. But
we'd love to have these racist shows, but what if the cast makes trouble?
But interestingly, the 1904 Olympics, the first African American to win an Olympic medal was in the 1904 Olympics.
Was it one of these anthropology
No,
events?
it was George Palage, who was an American, and he won the bronze medal in the 400 hurdle in the 1904 Olympics. And also, it was the first Olympics where an American Indian ran in the marathon, kind of setting the stage for Jim Thorpe later. Frank Pierce ran in the marathon. But maybe the real twist at the end was two members of the Zulu tribe who were there as part of a Boer War village, a Boer War exhibit, said, "Hey, can we run in the marathon?" And they took 12th and 5th place.
No, the first time they had ever run a distance event, maybe?
Yeah, they were like, sure. I mean, you can run in the marathon. Ha, ha, ha. And
can you imagine asking for some time off for your day job so you could run 26 miles? I think maybe I'd rather just go sit in my diorama. And that concludes Anthropology Days. Entry 053.NU1516, certificate number 53289, in the omnibus. If you want to complain about any of the issues raised in this episode. You probably won't be able to find us on social media, which does still exist, but not that big a part of my life right now, honestly.
Yeah.
Right as Instagram, right as people fled Instagram after all of Zuckerberg's antics, like my TV and publishing careers conspired to put me on Instagram. So
yeah, right. Are you actually there lurking? You said that you saw one of my posts the other day.
Well, I've lurked on Instagram for a while, but now just for Jeopardy promotional reasons and with a book coming out, I am posting there just because, if my show has to have a robust social media presence, we probably have to be on meta platforms, even the ones I don't want to be on.
Do you want to pitch your book right now to our listeners, who I assume are all going to buy it?
It won't be out. It won't be out for months. It's just a trivia book I have coming out this summer. But Jeopardy is always putting on, hey, don't miss tonight's show, and that's the kind of stuff where they want the keys to my account so we can do collabs or whatever. So
it's not you. It's somebody who's posing as you.
Sometimes it's me, and sometimes it's the social media people being like, "Hey, would you link to this?" or "Hey, can we put up this?" I don't know. Historically bad time for me to hop on a Zuckerberg platform, but here we are.
Does it move the needle? Does it move the needle, Kim?
We don't even know. They don't even know.
Yeah.
It's as we all know, ethical behavior is impossible under late stage
gaming journalism.
As we all know, ethics in gaming journalism so important. No, ethical behavior is impossible altogether under current capitalism.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And I feel like we can use that fatalism to absolve us of all responsibility.
Sure.
Of course I'm on Meta. Ethical behavior is impossible in modern capitalism.
Given how bad everything is, why wouldn't I just buy Chinese-made T-shirts until I die?
With everything that's going on, who's going to complain about me having an Instagram account?
Here.
I don't even know. Here. But you could complain to us. You could email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com to complain.
Don't do it. Don't complain.
Or to stick up for us. Why not?
Stick up for us. That's what we want.
You can mail things to P.O. Box 55744.
Do that.
Shoreline, Washington, 98155. I don't know what's in this box.
You brought a lot of boxes with you today.
This says to Ken and John.
That checks out.
It's a Renaissance painting. It's a
surely not a Renaissance painting.
No,
that would be nice.
It's some kind of collage of.
But then we'd argue about who gets it.
Krista wishes us a happy 7th birthday. The show debuted in December 2017, which means we are now, at this point, 7 1/4 years old.
Is that right? 7 years.
Krista thanks us.
That's longer than the career of the Beatles. Well, no.
It's
almost.
It's pretty much the Beatles as a chart-topping phenomenon, right?
Yeah, right.
Thank you for both being a great hang. Oh, that's the nicest thing you can say to a person nowadays, I think.
Being a good hang.
She says we've heard that we both like puzzles, which we do, and so she sent us something from her favorite puzzle designer.
I wish I had a favorite puzzle designer.
I know.
That seems modern.
Krista seems pretty cool. This is actually a card from Krista's own Etsy shop where she does weird collages. This is a 15th century teen goth giving us a little side eye. I regret saying Renaissance. It seems like it might be a little earlier. No, it looks Renaissance. Let me look at these puzzles. She says, I think I know which one John will pick.
Is it some kind of...
Well,
we'll hold it up and let's see.
These are both things that are near and dear to your heart. Do you think you will pick noodles for lunch?
Love noodles for lunch.
No, you haven't seen the second one yet.
I have a lot of noodles for lunch.
Do you feel this is like let's make a deal? You want to see what's behind the door?
I want to see the others. I want to see the other one.
That was correct. Eastern Bloc telephones.
Oh my God, I love it so much. I love them both, but I love that Eastern Bloc telephone. How many pieces are those?
These are little 500-piece puzzles, so it's like a challenge, but maybe a day or two if you're serious. I kind of like both. They're good because they're kind of grid collages, which means it's a puzzle that goes quickly. Yeah. Right? You can categorize things by their area.
Sort by color.
Krista, this is great.
I love them. And we love puzzles. Did you do a puzzle this Christmas?
We did. We finished one and started another.
Did you do it on the dining room table, or did you do it down in the basement?
Sometimes we've done both. Often in the San Juans, we have a puzzle going.
Oh, yeah.
And then the best thing about the San Juan ferries is there's often puzzles on the ferry.
I love that. I love the puzzles on the ferry.
We were on the ferry the other day, And I found the world's worst puzzle. It was just weird clip art of kind of just the cheapest looking clip art of houseplants, and then a thing saying there's a hell of a lot of houseplants in this puzzle. And I was like, well, this is the worst puzzle I've ever seen. So I went one table down and there was another puzzle, but it was called 100 Dogs Pooping.
No.
And it was just a collage of 100 dogs looking at me while they pooped.
No, thank you.
So I went back to the houseplant.
I'll tell you what the worst puzzle in history is. It's a 2,000-piece puzzle of Van Gogh's Starry Night.
Is that what you're doing right now?
No, I tried it a couple of years ago, and it sat on the dining room table for months. And let me tell you, there is not enough difference in Van Gogh's Starry Night between one spiral of a star and another spiral of a star to make any progress at all. We just worked and worked at this.
It's essentially a big close-up of one Eastern Bloc phone, which is not what you want.
Right.
You need a collage of 36 Eastern Bloc
You have to
phones.
be somebody who likes to solve puzzles based on the shape
Oh my
of
gosh.
the piece.
You know, Mindy will categorize pieces by shape.
I do at the very end.
I do at the very end, but Mindy's doing it on day 2. I'm like,
crazy.
She's like, well, of course, this one has the 2 knobs and this one has no knobs.
I have the good job, or what I consider to be the good job, because I solve the parts of the puzzle no one else likes. Like the ones that...
Do you start with the sky or something?
I definitely am like, I'm going to work on the brick wall, the sky, the forest. You guys do all the red houses and the waterfalls.
To me, that just sounds like you want to be left alone.
It is. That's exactly
I want
what
my
I
own.
want.
I'm not a collaborative person. I'm the only person who has been on every Long Winters record. I want to be over here in this corner doing my brick wall, and you can make your own creative decisions over there.
The other thing I am is the only person that's awake at 3 o'clock in the morning. So whatever it is you're working on, you better be nice to me or you're going to wake up and find it finished.
Here's a couple postcards. Ben from Montana sent this to the goods and cheese department, so it came to my desk. He's been meaning to write ever since I talked about going to Glacier because he manages one of the historic lodges there.
Oh, really?
That's cool. We did not think of going there in time to book one of the historic lodges, but they seemed very nice when we drove through them.
I'm kind of thinking about a trip up there. You had a good time, didn't you?
Glacier's great.
You're talking about Glacier in Montana,
right,
not Glacier
Bay or whatever it's called.
Glacier in Canada.
Oh, yeah, Canada has one too. You're right.
Well, I'm thinking about making a trip up there, so maybe I should get in touch with our man.
Well, here's how to win your way to Ben's heart. If you have any extra old watches or political pins, please send them my way. And he thinks he is owed this because he constantly advertises the podcast.
Nice.
We should look and see if he's moving the needle in Montana.
I have so many political pins.
It sounds like you two could cut a deal.
I've got some, Hubert Humphrey political pins.
Get me an upgrade at the Glacier Lodge in exchange for some old Humphrey for President pins.
All right, reach out to me, my friend, and I'll make a deal with you.
Yvonne and Stefan sent us a postcard because they visited the Big Duck in Flanders, New York. Some giant roadside, duck.
Did you see the big duck that was down here by the stadium?
Yeah, the big rubber ducky.
Rubber ducky.
What was that doing here? Does it advertise something?
No, it's just a big rubber duck. We drove by it, and my daughter was like, "Look at the big rubber duck." And I said, "You want to go over and see it?" And she said, "No, I can see it from here."
That's the thing about the bigness of the rubber duck. You don't have to go see it.
Yeah, it was big, and
you can see it from the freeway.
She said, "It's kind of giving us the hairy eyeball. I don't want to get any closer to that duck. It's got a weird look."
Imagine how big Ernie would be if that's the size of the duck. A giant kaiju Ernie appears over the horizon.
He would be as big as the stadium.
Yvonne and Stefan enjoyed the Big Duck in Flanders, New York, and thought we would enjoy this kind of strange Americana. They grew up in Washington State. What big thing do you wish Washington would recognize with an oversized statue? What do we have?
The Gooey Duck?
Don't we, out in Long Beach, don't we have a giant rocking chair or something? There's the biggest, frying pan. There's a big frying pan in Long Beach, I think.
I guess I missed it.
Oh boy, what a shame. You'll have to go back. You and I met up in Long Beach that day. You were right by the frying pan.
We did. Did you see the frying pan and you didn't mention it to me while I was there?
I really didn't want you to.
Boy, that was a long time ago.
That. I wanted to keep all that to myself.
Our children were little then.
It's true. They were the right age to enjoy a big frying pan. I feel like that's kind of it mail-wise. The best way to support the show is I mean, the best way is to send us an Eastern Bloc telephones puzzle.
Or an Eastern Bloc telephone.
Yes. Yes. Or a Humphrey for president pin that John can exchange for a very nice National Park Service hotel room.
Uh-huh.
Oh, wait, let me read one more.
He seemed to really, that's pretty ambitious to say I'm really into old watches. Like, I'm really into old cars, but I'm not asking you to bring me one.
But every junk store has a box of 50 cent
That's true.
Geraldine Ferraro pins. So, one more. This is one more postcard that I forgot to read. It's scenic Idaho, and it's kind of a very...
I challenge that.
It is the most generic. It's like a sunset with like kind of a nondescript landscape that you could literally take anywhere.
Yeah.
There are scenic parts of Idaho, but those parts
are.
are full of skinheads. Well, one scenic part is full of skinheads. The other scenic part is full of celebrities.
Well, there's the scenic part that's full of Mormons, but it's not very scenic.
That's what I'm saying. The Mormons have the ugly part, having ceded the pretty parts to the skinheads and Bruce Willis, respectively.
Right. Well, there's that middle part that you would think would be scenic, but it's just really a host to forest fires.
Our friend here, who doesn't write his name, I think, wants us to know about
Did
it.
he say that in his postcard? I do not write my name.
Well, there's no signature. I think
the
maybe
one.
it's possible he didn't realize that postcards don't have return addresses, so we don't know. But he has a nearly unprintable story about trying to go to a strip club in Lethbridge, Alberta. Speaking of ugly Mormon country, Lethbridge, Alberta. Sorry, Alberta. And realizing that Canada is a country without dollar bills, how does one make it rain on a stripper in a world of loonies and toonies? And unfortunately, he has a very graphic story involving a tube that explains exactly how one rewards a Canadian stripper.
No, whatever this is, I don't like it.
No, I'll never be able to see the word slot again.
Oh,
I think.
no, that's terrible.
But he then follows it up with, "Who says Canada has no culture?" So now we're going to get angry letters from Canadians just because this guy from Idaho went to a very disreputable strip club.
Well, we already get angry letters from Canadians because you come out against Canada time and time again.
I love Canada.
Well, I know you do.
I love Lorne Green. I love Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Okay. All right.
Those are the two. When I think of Canada, I picture two men, Lorne Green and Randy Bachman, and they're kissing.
I know that you support Kathleen Edwards.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Kathleen's lovely.
Yeah, you like Neil Young.
Oh, who doesn't like Neil Young?
Canadians.
I mean, honestly, my Canadian pantheon probably starts with Joni Mitchell.
Sure.
Like, who do we love more than Joni Mitchell?
Well,
Nobody.
I can think of a few.
Nope. A Canadian?
Yeah, even Canadians. John Candy.
No.
No, I don't love him more than Joni Mitchell, but
Shatner.
no.
Martin
Shatner's
Short.
not on my list. No. But
Terry Fox.
Bill Murray? Is he from Canada?
I think he's not actually.
No.
He's like Chicago area.
Yeah.
He's Canadian coded.
Who's from Canada?
Eugene Levy.
Yeah. The Weaker Thans.
You don't seem excited. The Weaker Thans, exactly.
The Weaker Thans are from Canada.
Don't they hate Winnipeg?
Do the Weaker Thans? Yeah.
I think they
there's
have
a
that
lot.
song.
There's a lot about Winnipeg that I personally love Winnipeg, but I could see where the Weaker Thans came out against.
For me, it's Guy Madden and Joni Mitchell, and nobody else is even in the conversation. But then there's all those Blue Jay fans driving down here in the summer.
You don't like them, do you?
And that's they've soured me a bit. Like, nobody loved Canada more than me, and these yahoos kind of had to ruin it for me.
It's just Torontons that you don't like.
No, they're not even from Toronto. These guys are all from somewhere in the Prairie provinces, or Kelowna. Is that how you say that?
Sure.
In BC. Weren't you just there?
I was, but I didn't ask anybody how to pronounce that. I don't take a ton of time figuring out how to pronounce things because my tongue won't do it. My tongue's going to do what my tongue's going to do.
Anyway, in addition to sending us postcards about possibly illegal Albertan sex acts, the other way to support Omnibus is to go to patreon.com/omnibusproject and take a look at the perks available to those who support the show. You'll have access to I think over 60 addenda episodes. Suddenly, like 60 to 70 hours of new Omnibus content will just appear on your feed.
And I gotta say, it's really good content.
It's better than these shows.
We're about to do We're about to record an addenda episode after we finish this one. And boy, I just can't wait.
What a relief to not have to think about ethnological, problematic ethnological work of the early 1900s.
All we have to do is read letters from people angry about the last time we talked about problematic ethnological research from the 1900s.
See, you can do it. That was like the echoic thing where you just said the thing you had just heard someone say.
Yeah, I'm not very good at that, but I did it then.
You just nailed it.
I didn't quite nail it. Did you hear me kind of stutter right at the end? I almost...
You had a little bit of
my head was like
trepidation,
yeah.
but you stuck to your guns and you were right.
Yay.
So patreon.com/Omnibus Project. You're missing out if you haven't checked it out.
Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we wish you many goods and cheese and hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.